Hi, my question is for Natasha. Have you read Husk by Corey Redikoff, the great Canadian Mennonite zombie novel?
I haven't read Husk. I am aware of the claim that it is the great Mennonite zombie novel, which is based only on the surname of the author being Mennonite. I hear there's no Mennonite content whatsoever within the novel itself. Is that true?
I understand that the main character, Mennonite, is mentioned 2 times.
Well, then I must read it. Thank you, Candace. Yes, I found a blog on Mennonites and zombies where people were frantically trying to find Mennonite zombies, and that novel was mentioned and discarded.
Okay, this is another question for Natasha. I was fascinated by your approach, combining the zombie studies and the Mennonite studies. I'm pretty new to the zombie studies. I don't think I've ever seen a zombie film.
Me too. Oh, I've seen a few.
Yeah, I have seen a few episodes of The Walking Dead. But I'm wondering, so Natasha and I know each other from our involvement at the Mennonite Museum out in Leamington. And I'm wondering what you think the response would be to your presentation out there. I know that the idea of escape and refugee and forming new culture and diaspora would be accepted without question, but I'm wondering about the zombie piece and if you could speak to that.
I think that you might have an answer to that question that you would like to share, and I invite you to do that.
Well, I was wondering about if we were to invite you to come out and give your presentation out there, how, I'm thinking the older generation may not be familiar with the zombie studies even.
I think Candace is referring to the Essex-Kent Mennonite Historical Association, which is run largely by seniors whose parents many of their parents those of Russian Mennonite origin, would have lived in Russia. I think all of those seniors would know about the story of zombie apocalypse, and I think they'd be very bemused by the way that I'm knitting it together with Mennonite studies.
It's another Mennonite question. I'm not really familiar with all the aspects of it, but up till now, there's been the availability of being able to escape, relocate, that type of thing. But if we had a worldwide zombie apocalypse and there was no place to escape, and I'm not trying to be funny or anything, but would the Mennonites fight then? What would they do?
That is such a brilliant question. Okay, my particular Mennonites, I'm a secular Mennonite. So I don't go to a Mennonite congregation. I very much admire the principle of non-resistance, but that's not a practice within my life. Wow, that sounds sort of weird. I don't beat my family. So there are many, many Russian Mennonites like me who, if there was a zombie apocalypse, we would survive because if we could run faster than someone else. Now, some of the old order communities, like you see in Zed Nation, who non-resistance is very much a part of their practice. Would they survive? I think they'd have to fight. And let me offer you a historical example. I know this is a convoluted answer. Back in the Ukraine, when my grandparents were living there, some of the Mennonite villages in the Mennonite Commonwealth there chose to arm themselves. And that was quite controversial at the time because they were going against 400 years of non-resistance, something that some of them had been in the 1500s killed for. And they chose to arm themselves because the Red Army was coming through the villages, the White Army was coming through the villages, and ultimately the anarchists were coming in and taking their food, taking their produce, taking their horses, arbitrarily killing them, laying their women on the ground. So some of the young men chose self-defense. And only now is that starting to come out in historical scholarship from the Russian Mennonite community. It's been something the community has been conflicted about all these years. So I guess the answer to your question is those Mennonites of my tradition and other traditions that believe in non-resistance, if an apocalypse happened, I think they'd have to adapt or die.
Hi, my question's for Dr. Key, actually, two of them. First, I was wondering if Shaun of the Dead was the subtitled movie. And
Yes.
okay. And the second, I don't really watch zombie movies, I'll be honest. I'm here. I like the emergency preparedness type thing in the apocalypse. But I like hero allegories. I like action movies, North American ones. And I was wondering kind of what your thoughts are of the whole hero allegory. Like you're talking about your character in that movie having a different perception in the whole zombie culture. I'm wondering if what you think if that's changed too, our North American perception around that heroic and what all that means versus an international flair, or if it's just part of like a zombie allegory change, or because you're kind of getting into that when your time ran out, and I'm just curious what your other thoughts were.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, I think one of the interesting things about Juan of the Dead in particular is he is an unapologetic slagger. We meet him floating on a raft, doing nothing, and saying, I wouldn't go to the United States because I would have to work. And again, for most of the film, trying to find the easiest way out until he just can't anymore. And I think that's an interesting take. And I think it really sets up the end of the film where he does kind of say, I'm going to take a stand and I'm going to stay here. It kind of shows that hero trajectory. If you look back, 1968 Night of the Living Dead, I think, is a great example of you have someone who kind of rises to this heroic moment, and yet everything that can go wrong goes wrong. And part of it is him, but most of it is the people around him. And I feel like zombie media, especially since 1968, you tend to get these two different trajectories. Either there's the heroic person who they're just screwed because everyone else around them will not listen or will not kind of become selfless and become part of this collective that needs to happen, or you have the people that do kind of rise above it. And one of the things I love about zombie media, one of the reasons I write about zombie films, is it's often women and people of color who are the people who rise up and say, no, we're going to fight back, and here's how we as a group are going to do it. And I think that's one of the reasons I was attracted to the genre in the first place.